Hi, welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can learn more about what we do here at officehours.global. Our first hour is about media and virtual production. The second hour is something that we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we'll be talking about branding and marketing 101. What is it? What isn't it? And how you can use it during your events. And tomorrow we'll get back to the green screen part 2, because you had so many great questions for us last week. We thought we'd bring it back. Well, let's get this party started. Over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Liberty. Rupert McRae has our first question this morning from Dallas, Texas. It says, in the Larix Broadcaster app for iPhone, there are several video stabilization options, standard, cinematic, and auto. Are these processing in software or accessing native controls in the iPhone's camera API?
John?
I have to admit, I spent way more time than I probably should have researching this, but I did find that those options are defined within the Swift programming language. So it looks like they're taking native advantage of the settings within the app. Was not great on the Larix site, but a little bit more Googling, and I was able to find an answer.
Alex?
Yeah, I had the same problem John had. It took me a long time to dig this out. Generally, I think if you see cinematic, that is going to be a notifier that's probably using the frameworks that Apple provides for the cameras.
And Bill?
As these sensors get bigger, that stabilization is pretty well understood. They oversample and then move a window algorithmically around to kind of try to stabilize things. You just have to be careful. The least stabilization is often the best, so still try to shoot well.
Next question.
Andy Carluccio from Washington, D.C. is up next. He says, has the Reddit Place project sparked any insights regarding interactivity on a global scale?
John?
What I found really interesting is definitely people who are live streaming together, and they're moving their whole communities to either take over different sections. And there's been, like kind of fake wars between friends where they'll throw up an image over top of their stream and kind of like take over a specific area and kind of change it all at the same time. It's a kind of amazing to watch in real time.
Guy, you were mentioning this a little bit before we got on air. Do you want to just level set for anyone who has not heard about this project?
Yeah, there's an article actually on it on the Washington Post. So if you think it's just a bunch of kids playing around, it's attracting some attention. So all this is drawn by little pixels, and like John was saying, some people are banding together. The way that we heard about it, I believe, was from the Reddit group on Black Magic, where it said, come help us draw the BMD logo. So a bunch of us yesterday were in after hours drawing this little logo. And the way it works is you just pick a tile. So just place a tile, and you got 5 minutes to place one tile. So like if I wanted to expand my black over here, I could then hit black and then hit the little checkbox. And now I've just overtaken this guy, encroached on his territory, if you will. So I'll put a link in the Discord, and you guys could jump over there and join our little fun game.
Very neat. Alex?
I think I'm too old for Reddit. I can't figure it out. I couldn't figure out where to see the picture, and then the comments just reminded me why I'm not in Reddit very often. Like I just looked at them all and I was like, I don't need to be here. So I haven't. I think that's the biggest problem. Is just that Reddit has its own culture that I'm not really part of unless I'm searching for something.
There's a place for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Next question.
Nathan Cashin, it looks like in Oregon City, Oregon, says, I was notified by Xfinity that I went over my 1.229 terabyte per month limit. I think I participated in office hours after hours more this month, which made me curious. Who on the panel keeps track of their monthly data usage? What's most used? And is unlimited worth it?
I've never done that. That's awesome. Jason?
Well, I have, and I'm a big nerd, so I'm going to, oh, by the way, thank you, Alex. Cool thing that you recommended last week. Last month, I used 22.88 terabytes, and yeah, it's worth it.
Jeffrey?
I run dual WAN at the house here, and I have the high-speed internet, and then of course the backup being AT&T right now, and it's lower. I can't get high speeds on it. I think it's like only 60 down, 10 up or something like that. But it's perfect if I needs to cross over. I don't lose the connection or anything like that. That's not on unlimited. But I could, for $30 more, I could do more. I'm kind of waiting because within the next 6 months, I have a feeling I'm going to be on the 5 gig plan on AT&T. And at that point, I'll probably do unlimited. But right now, I do have a 1 terabyte cap on that internet, which I watch with eagle eye.
Guy?
Yeah, they'll start sending you a bunch of warnings before you go over. So I have 2 connections as well, and I kept going over on my Comcast. They start sending you messages, and so you're well aware in a couple months of paying the extra. Thought about getting their modem, which if you use their modem, then you don't have to pay. You do get unlimited for bundled in. But I wound up just breaking down after 3 months of going over and trying to save bandwidth. It wasn't worth the headache, so I just paid the extra $30.
Got it. Rupert?
Just in general, I always watch out for what unlimited really means. Does that mean there's still a limit, and after which you're going to probably be charged, but do you get a reduction in speed, or what really happens when you hit these limits? It's sometimes sounds like unlimited, and you just hit a different limit or different restriction. To keep an eye on what's going on there, in terms of usage, and then that's another reason Unify can be a great solution, particularly if you have the gateway, because then it's really going to track and log everything down to a application type and source of the bandwidth and that kind of thing.
Alex?
Some of this also depends on whether you're in contract or out of contract. So if you're in the minimum contract with Comcast, they're not going to be very flexible with you. We were out of the contract, and we called, and we were paying $120 for 300 down, 10 up, or 15 up, or something like that. We called and said we were thinking about moving, and we ended up with 1 gig down with 30 or 40 up or something like that, 40 up, unlimited for $10 less than we were paying before. So Comcast, this is all. So we're paying $110 with the unlimited. We don't see any drop in speed later in the month. We don't seem to have any kind of negative impact on what we're doing, and they did it without much push, so you definitely want to call Comcast and tell them you're thinking about stuff if you're out of contract. If you're in contract, you're kind of stuck until you get out of contract.
Right. Mitchell?
Alex, is it okay if I drop your name? Because as soon as I'm done here, I'm calling Comcast.
No, don't drop. I don't think they'll.
I want the big McGilla.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Alex says I can get 1 gig down. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure they also look at your history with the company when they're making that decision. Next question.
The 7th scroll in Brooklyn's up next. Morning, guys. Is it possible to have NOOBS and Companion Pi on the same SD card, or do you need to flash either or to have them work? Side note, any more Pi sessions in the near future?
Plus one on the Pi sessions. Yes, Jason.
Yes, it can be done, and there is, after I think 2020, there is a native bootloader that you need an EEPROM update to do. It's under miscellaneous utility images, and that'll give you the bootloader EEPROM configuration.
Alex?
And yeah, we'll plan to do some more. I'm thinking even just doing another Playout B Raspberry Pi project. It's been a long time. We ought to just do it again for those who missed it. We talk about this infamous Playout B session that only a handful of us were at. So maybe we'll do it again and let everyone play. So we'll start working on when we do that.
Awesome. Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City is up next. Any GH5 users on the panel have thoughts on the Vlog option from Panasonic, given the additional cost and likely use cases?
Alex?
I don't know what the cost is, and I'm not using a GH5, but I can tell you in general, Log is a good idea. So what Log actually does is it gives you a lot. I'm not going to get into the technical of what it is in this answer, but what it does is going to give you a lot more highlights. So basically, it rolls off those highlights at the top and at the bottom, but really at the top, and it really protects a lot of those. So skies and other things that are bright, it's going to hold on to that information. Now it's going to look a little washed out, raw. But then when you go back to correct, you'll still have that information inside of that image, and you can pull that information back out and decide how you're going to handle that contrast. So in general, I try to shoot anything that matters to me in Log.
Next question.
Alex Lindsay's up next from Novato, California. Has anyone taken a look at the new DJI Mic system?
Jason.
I sure have. In fact, I've got an email about it this morning. Very, very cool. I feel like in a perfect world, companies like DJI should be replacing body packs that cost less than $1,000. My one question is, really is are they ever going to have good preamps?
Courtney.
I've looked, if you're talking about the wireless, their dual wireless system, that's what I have looked at. I've looked at several people who've had the advanced models of them and did tests with them, and it seems that their wireless transmission is much better than the Rode Go, which they're designed to compete with. And DJI is very good with digital transmission because of their drone transmissions can go several miles. And this one claims to be able to go like 300 or 250 meters, which is a pretty long distance for one of these Wi-Fi band-based transmitters. And it also records, which most of the professional wireless mic systems aren't allowed to do local recording unless they pay Zaxcom their license fee for their patent. So maybe DJI licensed the patent from Zaxcom, so that allows them to record locally as well as transmitting, which is a handy feature to have. So if it drops out, it's recorded locally in the built-in RAM in each individual microphone and does dual channel recording, and I think it timestamps them as well. So that's a really handy feature.
Jeffrey?
So last year, of course, DJI came out with the Pocket 2, and with the Pocket 2, you had the ability to do the microphone. This is probably I would say the first generation of that microphone system. And of course, it comes to the lapel. There is a plug that if you want to do a lav to it, to get that out of the frame, you can definitely do that. The biggest problem, once again, is the Wi-Fi 2.4 gigahertz. It works like when I'm in my studio like this, I could go a full 250 meters away and if I didn't turn a corner or go behind a wall, I would be fine. But when you get into something like I use these for CES, and I got about 20 feet away from the camera, and it started to cut out left and right. So you just got to watch out when it comes to Wi-Fi wireless.
And Alex?
Yeah, I do think that they probably have pretty good range in a lot of environments. To Jeffrey's point, I think that it won't be in all of the environments. I think that if you're using it in your kitchen or in your little studio, I think that it's going to be a great thing, and I think it probably will be more stable. I will say that my Rode Go goes through walls and down I go a long way through my house, and they still work. But I do believe that DJI will probably do it better, just because they know wireless so well. The one thing that I couldn't quite figure out on their website was whether they took a microphone input, so whether they took it doesn't show it anywhere. And I think I see the picture and I think I see a microphone input there, but all of the marketing materials show them clipping it on, which is just a horribly ugly way to use a mic. It was, like this whole clipping the thing on is just a really ugly approach to microphoning. And so I want to put a lav on it or a headset or something. And I just couldn't quite figure it out looking at it. They don't mention it anywhere, but it does. The pictures seem to show an 1/8-inch jack.
Bill?
I've had really good luck with everything that I own from DJI. I was surprised. I didn't realize at heart, I should have, that it was a Chinese company. And so I'm interested in whether or not, in terms of the patent stuff, that has anything to do with what they'll come to market with in the U.S. and just whether or not there might be conflicts internationally coming up later. But I don't know.
And Jeffrey?
There is one other thing that they showed that kind of concerns me a little bit, and that is you can put it onto a 3-axis gimbal, but the idea is that you hang the receiver from the box. Now, I've tested a few other other microphone systems that do that, but they're a lot smaller. They're like a little strip. This is the box that hangs just a little bit past the phone, and it's about 24.9 grams. But I'm a little bit concerned that that's going to start to tweak onto your Lightning port on your iOS device or Android phone for the USB-C, and you might have some problems with your plug afterwards. So I'd be a little bit weary about plugging it directly into the phone for a 3-axis stabilizer.
Good point. Next question.
Ike Potter is up next from Hanover, Germany. And Ike says, has Alex already scheduled his in-ear polymerization after-hours event for his new UE earbuds?
Nigel.
And if he hasn't, could he please wait till mine arrive? Because last time I checked, they're stuck somewhere in Mesquite, Texas, which is a very nice place when you're smoking wood, but very annoying when they should have been delivered last week.
How long till they get there, did they say?
No, UPS is doing the we'll let you know when we know, which is becoming an increasing thing I'm seeing on packaging at the moment.
Got it. Alex?
I don't think that smoking wood is good for your health. That's all I'm saying. Like, I just don't do it, man. Anyway, so.
But applewood bacon. Oh.
no, but like, what is he smoking? Wood. Anyway, still sitting here. I'm waiting for you, Nigel. So when you have it, you'll let me know, and then we'll schedule it, and then we'll do the mix. But it's still sitting here, so we'll do that.
I think you just made Nigel's day. So I just stay tuned to After Hours, or we might come back on and share when that happens.
Yeah.
Next question.
Steve Fisher in Pittsburgh, North Carolina. How do I approach office hours to inquire about involvement with a documentary on the future Outer Banks in North Carolina? Is this an appropriate forum?
Alex?
I'll selfishly say absolutely, and contact me in Discord about it. I've been going to the Outer Banks on and off since I was 5 years old, or maybe 4 years old, and so it's near and dear to my heart. I prefer the Avon area myself, just in case you're wondering. But I've stayed all along that, all the way down to Hatteras and all the way up to Duck. so anyway, I would be very interested, because I have seen a lot of changes that have made me scared. So I'd love to discuss that, and just ping me. I don't know how office hours gets involved, but I'd love to talk more about it.
Next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota says E3, the conference, has been canceled this year. No virtual event, just plain canceled. What implications does this have for the future of trade shows, virtual or otherwise?
Courtney?
Well, I'm not sure about predicting the future, but E3 is kind of a special object, a special event, because it involves gaming, and almost every booth has hands-on gaming of whatever they're trying to show you. And so something like this in an environment of a pandemic, even a waning pandemic, could be dangerous. And I think the LA County Department of Health is looking at the new variant that is looking like it will peak around, start to grow around the time that was scheduled for. So they may have just gotten cold feet and canceled it this year. I don't know if it will. It depends on, the pandemic situation, whether it'll come back in future years or whether they'll abandon it. But it's a very big moneymaker for LA and the convention center.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I really think that they messed up and something. And they're not going to say that, of course, but I really think that they messed up, because they said we're going to plan for 2023. But the reality is, by them taking a year off, they've pretty much dinged themselves. And if that means that they're going away with gaming, that's kind of tough, because remote gaming is still not there yet, and you got to be there for judging and things like that. So and there's also another conference called the Summer Games Fest that stepped right in the second that E3, because they did it on April 1st. Everybody thought it was an April Fool's joke, and then they basically said, the Summer Games Fest stepped right in and said, no, we've got our conference. So if E3 doesn't happen, come to our conference. I think that somebody will just basically step in and take over that space. And if they're very successful, E3 might not be around in the next 5 years.
Alex?
I'm not sure any conference will be around in the next 5 years at that size. so I think the conferences have a lot of trouble in front of them, because people are getting out of the habit. So not doing anything is, as Jeffrey said, a pretty an unforced error, because they're going to, people, once they get out of the habits, it's really hard to get them back in. And the reality is, conferences were obsolete about 5 years ago, and they're just slowly working their way out. So it's just a matter of this is just accelerating it. But the problem is having it physically. Like NAB is a shadow of itself this year, and that has a lot of folks wondering whether they need to be there next year. So it's a double-edged sword. I think that what happened, my guess, I don't know anything, I don't have any inside baseball, but watching what happened here is they announced it early. They announced months ago that they weren't going to have, maybe 6 months ago, that they weren't going to do a physical event. They're going to do a virtual event. I think they just couldn't find a platform they were happy with, or a process that they were happy with, or they couldn't get enough people. Like, they thought if we get ahead of it and we turn it down that path, we can get momentum, and they just couldn't find the momentum. And so I think that's probably why they shut it off. I think it's unfortunate, because I really thought they were ahead, because I do think that existing conferences should look heavily at the online experience, because that's prepping them. And same thing that, magazines should have paid attention to the web when they were still big, and so by trying to hang on to the past, they're not setting up their future at all with their installed base. So it's for all of them, they're going to have some trouble.
Yeah, and what I've seen with some bigger events too is just focusing on like E3 and the gaming community. Like, this is a die-hard community. So look, to Jeffrey's point about like taking a year off, well, hopefully in that year's time, they're either doing some pop-up events or really working hard on like, how can we do this virtually, and tapping the office hours community for some of those resources. Like, there's still so much opportunity. It's just that it's going to be, repackaged or rebranding plug. Alex?
Well, I do think it's possible to use their connections to do something weekly where they're interviewing game developers, they're talking to about games, they're doing releases, and what I think they'd find after a year or two of that is they didn't need the conference anymore, but they can definitely use, it would at least protect them because they have a big mailing list, they have a lot of people that are interested, and they could be doing monthly or weekly events that are building interest into the next year. Whether they do one, they'll do another one. But the thing is they need to use their current impact to extend into the online kind of system that's not going to be connected to one date, but connected year round.
Courtney?
Yeah, and another thing is there's been a lot of consolidation in the game business, and bigger companies are swallowing up a lot of the smaller companies. And I think they're looking at, E3 is such a cacophony of announcements that a new announcement can get lost unless you're one of the majors. And so I think they're looking at the fact that the bigger players, Microsoft, Sony, et cetera, are looking at, well, maybe we can make a bigger splash if we just create our own separate event somewhere down the line, and that way they can get more press coverage, they can stick out a lot more, and get more bang for their buck marketing wise.
Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany is up next. He says, how do you prepare your lower Fenwick AV chain seen during the office hours audio check? Can someone please share a common template?
John?
Chris Fenwick is a guy who has made most of these for people. If you have an official Fenwick, you're a lucky guy. He creates them all within Keynote, and then exports them as a PNG. A lot of people are using either their Blackmagic or OBS to kind of display that over their video.
Alex?
And as a note, if you make your own, it's a faux Fenwick. If you make a lower Fenwick is one that's made by Chris Fenwick, and all you have to do is send him an email like, "This is my chain," and he'll build one for you and send it back to you. It takes him a couple minutes, and he does them for anybody who asks. So you can have your own authentic lower Fenwick, but if you make your own, it's never going to be better than a faux Fenwick.
And then just to go back, Ike, it's just your chain. I see that you have that in the question as well. So hopefully you can get one. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, up next with, when used with an external power supply and HDMI output, can a GoPro be set to auto power on when powered up from cold?
Jeffrey?
The GoPro has a remote, and with the remote, you can actually do the power up and power off sequence. But you definitely need to have the GoPro in a point where it can accept those types of connections while the video is turned on and turned off. I always find with GoPros, you have to physically touch those things, especially if you're doing streaming. Unless they fixed it with the 10, the biggest problem was every time I tried to stream with a GoPro, it would ask me, "Are you trying to stream?" And I'd have a dirty screen come onto there until I actually went to the back and hit clean screen. So if they fix that, that's great. But if not, I usually have to touch the GoPro every single time.
Alex?
I believe that the older GoPros had a different connection, and it was more of a raw. I can't think of the name, which connection it was, and you could actually remote it that way because it was designed to interface with other pieces of hardware. But that's gone away, I think, in 3. I think 3 or 4 got rid of that connector, and then after that you weren't able to remote it. And I think you have to hit the button now.
Next question.
Chris Widner in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. Has anyone tried Catch Camera? I've been playing with NDI apps, and this one seems solid with limited testing. Thoughts?
Guy?
Yeah, this is that app running downstairs on my iPad. I hooked it up via Ethernet, and you can see this little cat thing. I don't know if I would say it's the most solid thing that I've played with. On my PC, it showed up as a black screen, and then on my Mac, you can see that it's actually working and it's full frame, and it seems fine. It reminds me a lot of Filmic Pro. It has the ability to focus, change cameras, change bit rates. So it seems pretty solid. This has been running now for an hour, and that's the nice thing about asking questions ahead of the show, because I had time to download the app and fire it all up and hook it all up so you could see it.
That's awesome. Next question.
Jeff Vreeland in Indianapolis, Indiana says, I'm running a Logitech C920 camera. I'd like to make an upgrade on the camera. Any recommendations that is not breaking the bank?
John?
The Logitech Brio is the only webcam I would really recommend. stepping further into that, if you can pick up an old Sony A5100, it's a great use case as a webcam. I found one on my local Facebook page for about $200. With that, with a capture card, you're gonna be looking great.
Mitchell?
I agree with John. That's exactly the one to do. But don't throw out your C920 just yet. I have one over here, and I have it just so I know how bad it used to be.
Rupert?
I mean, the C920 was the workhorse of USB cameras, USB webcams for a long time. You can upgrade to the Brio. It has a slightly sharper image, but it has the bigger sensor, so you can crop in and get a bit more control. If you want to stay in with the USB camera realm, you could also look at the Huddle Cam. It's got more features, but probably nothing better than the Brio in terms of image quality. But probably the number one upgrade you could do for the C920 or even the Brio is light, lots of light. You may just get better results by doing that.
Agreed. Alex?
Yeah, I'll have to say I have almost every modern web camera out there, and the Brio is still the leader of image, pure image quality. There's always something wrong with the other ones that I've used, and I buy them all. The ones that are 4K for whatever, in the same realm as the Brio, and it's still the leader.
Next question.
Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington. I work for a university extension, and they've tasked me to find a low or no cost solution for phones for a 3-year temp location. We have Teams, but no calling ability. And he wonders, Google Voice, anything else? And it's a 15-person office, if that makes a difference.
John?
I would extend your Microsoft licensing to include the voice for Teams. If your people are already familiar with it, it's going to be an easy tool for them to use. And it's quite easy to kind of just build that right in. If you have the ability to do that, I would definitely go down that path. Great voice quality.
Rupert?
Exactly. If your team's environment is in the Office 365 ecosystem, then there are definitely some calling packages you can add onto that. It won't be no cost. It will be, costing depending on what the features you want. If you're dealing in a group environment where you're going to need features of whatever you may be doing, hunt groups or calling out, calling in, you just want to make sure that whatever package you get has those features. You mentioned Google Voice. I'm a big fan of Google Voice, but that's really a one account to one user type scenario. So you need multiple accounts, and you're not going to really get any group features out of that, like hunt groups or all the features you might need if you're working in a team.
Alex?
Yeah, we had Teams. We were doing the call out function of Teams was a little painful as far as from a price perspective. Moved to Zoom. So even though it's a largely Teams and organization, we're using Zoom for the calls.
Jason?
I too adore Google Voice, but I think Zoom is your best bet in this case.
Guy?
Yeah, we also switched to the Zoom phones. We have an enterprise account, and so it wasn't an easy task to get all the hardware. So we actually rent their phones as well. I'd say, what's the missed time worth to you? I wouldn't be looking at a no-cost solution because this is your job, so take it super seriously. I would at least give them a call and address the concerns with the sales rep.
Next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida says, how do the bands perform on stage like they're being rained on?
Bill?
Well, if you were watching the Grammys last night, they did it with Billie Eilish by actually raining on her at some point. So that's the long, complex. They had her in water, and then they actually turned on rain for her. There are a variety of overlays, though, that will simulate rain. You have to be careful when you're using them, though, because it's putting a layer of special effects between the camera and the party. So obviously the rain isn't affecting the party or whatever you're shooting the same way that it would in a natural rainstorm. You can fake that with a lot of time and effort by, for example, having makeup go in and spritz them in between so that they get wetter as the fake rain comes in. But it's a complex thing and takes some work.
Courtney?
Yeah, I saw the Billie Eilish, but I think it was fake rain because I noticed that, you didn't see any water building up on the drum set. Their clothes weren't getting wet because she wore that same T-shirt for the rest of the night, and it would have been soaked if she was actually getting rained on. I think it was, although it's hard to say in Vegas because they have those stages that are set up for Cirque du Soleil where they work a lot with water and rain trays where it drops in a very, semicircular area like a rain curtain between the audience and the act doesn't really get wet, but they see the rain, and it looks, and light shoots through, and it casts shadows on the players. And if they want to look like they're in the rain, they could every now and then, mop their brow or pretend to be electrocuted on the electric guitars. That would sell it a lot more.
Jeffrey.
I've also seen people use hazers or smoke machines and then lighting effects that actually simulate a rain going down. It's actually pretty cool when you see it. Glitter for drummers. This started a long time ago when I can't remember who it was. They poured beer over the drums, and then every time they hit the drum would just go wild with water. And of course they've replaced that with like glitter and things like that, so you can have something fun and make it look like there's rain coming down in many different ways without having it to be wet.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Chris Widner mentioned Catch Camera, the iOS camera app that broadcasts NDI over Wi-Fi. Wouldn't NDI over Wi-Fi not be as stable as NDI over Ethernet?
John?
Yes. No, but seriously, I think the anything that's going to be real time, you're going to struggle with over Wi-Fi. They're just going to have an issue where there's going to be a bundling of traffic that has to happen. It has to make a decision. You're going to see the impact of those decisions while you're on Wi-Fi versus Ethernet.
Rupert?
Yeah, Ethernet is always going to be more desirable, more stable, most likely. If you are doing it over Wi-Fi and that's the best effort is all you've got and you've got to get something through, then, sure, you could use that. Or if you're lucky enough to be in a very quiet Wi-Fi environment, then it may be stable. Or if you are in a highly managed network, maybe you could prioritize that, traffic on your Wi-Fi, but still Ethernet is going to be more stable each time.
And Jeffrey?
And if you decide to go Wi-Fi, look into Wi-Fi 6E. That's the one that's actually meant for streaming video. That'll be your best bet in the connection because it'll be high speed, and of course keep it as dedicated as possible than from the other networks, and you'll have at least your best foot forward.
Next question.
Chris Widner in Lafayette, Indiana has this one. Our local archery club wants me to shoot a really cool promo with crossbows for an object like a bolt traveling at 220 feet per second, 90-pound draw. What frame rate or camera should I be looking at to rent?
Alex?
You will be, at a 240 frames a second or something like that, you can probably get a reasonably good movement, but to really get that, you're talking about 1,000 frames a second, to do it. There's some Sonys that actually have that, but they tend to be a little bit lower res, I think, for the 900 to 1,000 frame piece. Most of the time when we're really doing this, we're using Phantoms. So those are the Phantom cameras are the ones that we typically use when we need really high rates.
Guy?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest as well. And you could rent them. I just put a link in Meccano. It's about $3,500 for 7 days. But yeah, at 1,000 frames per second, you're going to get the frames that you want. I would say if you can find somebody in the area that can shoot, because you're also going to need the glass. So that's a PL mount camera. So having somebody that has the experience and then has the correct media, because that's the other part when you're capturing all this. There's tricks to it too. You would need a lot of light. So it's not as simple as just turning on the camera and shooting, because think about it, you got to expose for those frames, so you do need the light and the know-how to make it all work.
Mitchell?
Yeah, plus one on the lighting. You need a lot of light if you're shooting with a Phantom. And the cool thing about a Phantom is because it's shooting so fast is that you get all kinds of movement and gyrations that you never would have thought were there, like the feathers might move a little bit, or the instrument or the arm of the person that's winding it back. It's just magical what happens at that speed.
Bill?
They charge, and I was going to come and re-emphasize the lighting aspects of it. This is a time when you want a lot of grip gear around. If you're doing it outside, you want beadboards and other reflectors that will just toss tons of light into there, because at that frame rate, the camera's not getting a lot of exposure time at all. So that if you're indoors, you're talking about some serious grip and electric to get enough light to get that clear.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City says, in the office, we have a small fleet of mobile Zoom rooms, think Neatboard and DTen D7 on wheels. Are there any other tracking devices like Airtags that might be useful in reporting their whereabouts?
Rupert?
bit of a curveball here, and maybe not the ideal solution, but one trick I guess I've used to track down devices on large campuses is look at the network. You can, if you've got a managed network, you can most likely drill in there and see which either switch or access point that device is connected to, or which one it was last connected to. That's something I've used in the past to track stuff down.
John?
You can also append GPS units to them, depending on how big the campus is. Also, to what Rupert said, there is technology within Cisco for hyperlocation that leverages the access points that you're connected to or last connected to, and it can help you geolocate a device.
Alex?
Given that you're in an environment that is largely connected, one thing to think about is also, Bluetooth LE is another solution that can identify a location within about 3 feet. So the ultra wideband that the trackers that you're talking about, the Apple trackers, get down to about 6 to 10 centimeters. So it's a lot more accurate, but their range is much lower. So that's the thing to kind of consider there.
Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton in the U.S., California, I believe. If the DJI Pocket 2 had HDMI out and control, could it be a solid mini pan-tilt zoom camera?
Jeffrey?
Actually, there are a couple companies that are working on it. I have a friend that's working on it called Cosmo Streamer. I'll put it into the show notes, and basically you'll take a Raspberry Pi like this one. This is a Pi 1 or a Pi 4 for the new DJI Osmo 2 or Pocket 2 that basically hooks up via the USB-C. And think of the Pi as like an Android phone, because that's how it's passing through. And there are some small little problems with it. There's a very, very slight latency to it. I haven't really delved into the Pocket 2 one just yet, but with the original Pocket, I used it for many different things. I could actually control it and use it as video. It's not going to be the greatest thing because you're talking a very small camera, just like the OBS bots and things like that. If you need high quality, get yourself a PTZ. That's going to cost a little bit more.
Courtney?
Yeah, I don't have the Pocket 2. I have the Osmo Pocket 1. And it does work if you're just recording. If you're not going to do live streaming with it, it makes a very good PTZ camera because the app that DJI sells that goes with it plugs into the USB on the bottom. And so you get you about a 20-foot USB 3 cable, which will still work, and you see the image on it, and you have a little control on the touch screen of you can pan, tilt. And the other thing, it has a lot of artificial intelligence in it. You can tap on the screen and tell it to track this particular item. It doesn't have to be a face. It can be any kind of object that's going to be moving in the frame, and it'll work to always keep that centered in the frame. And because it's a real gimbal, it does it smoothly, and it does all those moves very smoothly, and it looks very good. Much better than the PTZ, where your control gets relayed to the servos in the head, and then it moves, and it can be jerky. It really smooths out all the movements because of its AI aiming and intelligence. It's in the control of that.
Next question.
Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. We had an issue with on-screen Talon's eyeline being quite far off camera in an announcement piece. The script auto cue was suggested, but I suspect that brings as many problems as solutions. Any thoughts?
Mitchell?
As I figure out that question, if you shot 4K for 1080 post, you can just scale and move the image where you need to have it go. If you didn't do that, hopefully you shot it at 8K for 4K post. But you're good for up to 120% before it starts to really fall apart if you're moving the image around a little bit in order to match the eye line.
Courtney?
Yeah, I'm not sure how moving the image will help the eye line that much unless you have a beam splitter. But one thing we do is we use a small, if we don't have a prompter and it's a steady cam, let's say, that can't take the weight of a prompter and the camera's going to move, is we'll mount like a 7-inch monitor like this directly above the lens. So the lens is here. And as long as you're about 4 to 10 feet away from it, and you can put the text on a big enough size to be seen at that distance, the eye line directly above the lens is really hard to distinguish from directly in the lens unless you're closer than about 5 feet. So a solution like this, and a lot of people, if you have a magic arm, you can just mount it on any camera for Steadicam, etc. It doesn't add that much weight, and you don't have the disadvantage of shooting through a piece of glass, which drops your f-stop some and creates reflection problems and the other things. So, and having to reverse the image. This way you don't have to reverse the image. So it can solve a lot of problems if you just have a small monitor in your kit that you can feed a teleprompter signal to.
Bill?
And depending on your talent, and some people can do this and some people can't, another option is an ear prompter, which really feeds the script into a talent's ear and they parrot it word for word. I've used them and had great success with them, and I've had talent, but talent falls into two categories, those who can do this and those who can't. Some people get totally confused with hearing something they're supposed to say right before they say it. Other people can naturally do it, like the kids who parrot the talking thing. So it just depends on whether it works or not for you.
Yeah, and if it's ongoing, then that would be an opportunity to help this talent get used to it. Comfortability. Alex?
Yeah, I think what Bill was talking about of those who can and who can't. Those who can is about 1% of the world. So it's so that we just want to be careful of that. It is. I've seen it work to Bill's point, but it's to someone who really knows how to do it and is practiced and trained to do that. Not something you can't do it with someone new. I would highly recommend a teleprompter. I just wouldn't use the auto script one. I will say that will cause. If you're using it, if you're new to it, it's somewhat limited as far as how you connect to it. In the past, it's expensive as well. You can find a lot of less expensive ones, but the teleprompter is a pretty good solution for what you're doing. So kind of what it's designed for.
Courtney.
And one thing I was going to mention, I forgot. I've seen demonstrations of software now that can correct eyeline. It goes in with AI, and it's like a filter that like a Facebook filter, and it goes in, takes the eyes, and moves them directly into the lens in real time and tracks the head and everything, so that it corrects eye lines even if you're looking way off camera like that. So it can actually be fixed in software in real time.
Alex?
When it works, it's cool, but you should see when it doesn't work. It looks so bad. It is the most terrifying. It's just like someone evil has taken over your body. So I've seen it. We've seen some tests of it. I've seen it work in it when it's working perfectly. And what'll happen is it'll be like a couple frames where it doesn't, it gets bad light or something. And it does this weird thing, and you're just like, whoa, it's not there yet.
Yeah. While he was saying, I was like, that sounds a little Exorcist-like. If it doesn't work. When
it works, it's amazing, and you're like, this is the future. And when it doesn't work, you're like, holy smokes, that is not the future. So it's just it's hot and cold.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has a fun one. In the intro to a Laser Spectacular event, they used an 80s style radio DJ voice, like more music with less talk. How is that powerful narration style created? Is it the voice, the mic processing, or both?
Mitchell.
It sure wasn't that, Bill. Actually, it's mostly your presentation and, a little bit of technique, but it would be more like, now, more 80s music. Something to that effect. That's technique.
Courtney?
Yeah, and there are certain vocal processing stuff that's used in AM radio, which narrows the frequency response or adds echo. So you can tart it up with some stuff, but it's mostly the announcer learns to do that, which we used to imitate all the time as a bad DJ in the early days of radio.
And Bill?
I worked for a brief period of my career in radio in El Paso, Texas, and across the border in Juarez, where most of the big, they had clear channel stations down there, and the amount of processing to do things like extrapolate out vowel sounds hugely and echo everything and deep reverb, those things can help as a performer, but at some point, you got a performance to start with.
And Alex?
And there's two things there that I wasn't sure what that question meant. There's a repeat, more, like that happens, and that's actually a filter that we used to use, for that, where it's actually stuttering as it goes forward. But then otherwise, the bigger more is some oftentimes a office in proximity, like that type of thing, as well as we use some filtering as well. So for those.
Next question.
Samuel Novik in Norway says, do you have a suggestion for a USB-C adapter for Android that can output HDMI video and power the phone simultaneously, specifically for an LG V30?
Rupert?
Last time I messed around with this on Android, I kind of had an aha moment because I just happened to plug a docking station into the phone and it gave me, it lit everything up. So, and that suddenly gives you all the I/O that you could possibly need, display, USB, all kinds of things. So you may just want to just research the compatibility, just carefully, or test it. But if you're looking for doing that way, anything class compliant like from OWC should give you all that, but just worth testing. But the versatility, once you've got that, is pretty neat.
Jeffrey?
For our remote kits, we used a lot of these USB hubs. I got this one from Lemerel, for example. It has, not only does the HDMI and the power pass through, it also has Ethernet to it. So I could fully plug this device in. I also use this from my iPad now that I'm playing with apps like Top Director. Because with Top Director, they just informed me today that we can do the HDMI out into an Atem as a program out. So that might be a good game changer for bringing NDI into an Atem Mini. Hopefully, once that comes out, I'll test that. But the biggest thing is you have an older phone, Android phone, 2017, and the processor might not be powerful enough for you to do the video and do the power pass through. So make sure that it might just not be possible on the phone. I've never tested that, so I'm just spitballing on that. So just check it, because I know that Android can do that with the later Snapdragon processor inside.
Thanks. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Ricky G in Messagua. I probably mispronounced that. Sorry. Mississauga, thank you very much, Liberty. I appreciate that. Some months ago, Chris Fenwick was using a pluggable USB Dual 4K display adapter with Zoom ISO. Did this method work out, or is the more expensive route with a Blackmagic Design Decklink Duo the more reliable gold standard? We're planning to have 4 presenters.
Alex?
The Decklink Duo is definitely more reliable as a gold standard. I think it is just a much better setup than the I think that Chris has even had some issues with the dual 4K. It's kind of a hack, so it works some of the time, but and it was great to do when you don't have a Decklink, but I would get a Decklink.
Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany says CVP in the UK and AV Prof Shop in the Netherlands, maybe, NL, are selling an Atem Mini Extreme Iso for around 45% off. What does that mean? Are we expecting a new model?
Alex?
Oftentimes when we get near new NAB and you see a huge price drop on a handful of stores, it usually means they're dumping the materials. So it doesn't always mean that. So it could be that they got some great deal, or there's some kind of promotion that they've worked out, or something else there. But oftentimes, and if that looks like an incredible deal, so let's clean them out. Like let's So I'm tempted to get a second one at that price. So it's a really, really good deal.
Next question.
Fleety in Bali, Indonesia says, is there an app to monitor scopes or waveform via HDMI or USB-C out of an Atem Mini Extreme when SDI isn't a part of our chain?
John?
No, but Omniscope is what I use personally. It can take HDMI or USB camera and display that. It's really great. David Brady is the one who exposed me to that.
Guy?
Yeah, I'd also recommend NOOBS Omniscope. The other one that is kind of an industry standard that's been around on DIT carts for a while is this one behind me, which is Scope Box on the Mac. So that's another one to take a look at. But pound for pound, just these ones are beautiful on NOOBS Omniscope. So I'd take a look at the demo that you can download for free.
And Alex?
Omniscope. That's all I got to say.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City says, should washable keyboards be considered by companies as the return to the office trend continues? Any opinions or experiences with this? And he has a link to one there.
Jason?
Washable keyboards are nothing new. My immediate thought is, unless you're going to enforce that people actually wash their keyboards with policies, it makes no difference.
Sorry, John?
I just we'll throw away keyboards that look gross. Clorox wipes, simple stuff like that to keep going. Simple sunlight seems to be enough to destroy COVID. So if you're looking for a health and safety thing, I don't think it's a big movement there. And honestly, just like, how often do people move? Are desk sharing being put into place? Different things that you'll need to understand as a company before you can, I think, really make that call.
Rupert?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the washable keyboards either. If we're talking about a hygiene type thing, particularly in lockdowns, what we've seen. If you do have people moving around a lot, did see some folks, some environments that chose to just issue everybody with their own keyboard and mouse, and they would pick that up and take it with them to their new desk. A bit cumbersome if you're dealing with full size equipment, and particularly wired. But to that end, I think I've seen a couple of vendors, maybe Logitech, release some new like fleet management for wireless keyboards, to where you can literally have people roaming around with their personal keyboard and mouse, and you can kind of assign that to their workstations or let them roam and manage the fleet. So it's not the only people that are thinking about it.
Courtney?
Yeah, I recently went to my dentist's office, and they handle it another solution, which is they have this disposable plastic that they just lay over the keyboard, and they type through the plastic, because they've got computers in every single exam room, and they don't want to be dealing with bringing them in and out or having to clean them with a disinfectant, because that gets messy and it can harm electronic equipment. It's easier just to take a cheap piece of saran wrap-like type plastic and lay it over the keyboard. Each patient that comes in, and they come in and they just peel off that and strip out a new one and lay it over the top. It's a lot easier than trying to wash it. It keeps it clean.
Bill?
I just want to acknowledge that top percentage for whom keyboard touch is a near religious experience. We remember the poor Apple butterfly keyboard thing, where legions of people were up in arms because the touch of what they typed on every day had changed even a little bit. So for a subset, it's critically important, and they just won't accept any of these mitigations. They need their own type keyboard. And
Alex?
Yeah, as I said before, rubber, you can get these rubber overlays, and you could have everybody have their own, but I think that'd be a lot easier than trying to replace all the keyboards. And I've used those for many keyboards that we've worked in.
Next question.
Craig McFarland, any comments on the Grammy Awards' impressive LED backdrops and production?
Bill?
I just really enjoyed the show. I thought, of all the award shows, I've always admired the Grammys as much as any of the others, because the actual performers get to perform. They generally do not lip sync. They generally do perform adequately. They moved into a new venue this year in the MGM Grand, which is a performance venue. So it had excellent lighting. It had a lot of options for setting up one act while another was on. And I thought the performance side of everything, whether you like particular kind of music or not, I thought they did a really nice show. Were there technical flaws? Yes, there were, but that kind of added to the liveness of it. So I'm going to be back next year to enjoy the performance part of it. By the way, their In Memoriam was just gorgeous in terms of 4 live singers doing just a beautiful job. So I'll come back for that if nothing else.
Courtney?
Yeah, there's another question about that, the In Memoriam segment, but I think the LED wall was a standing one that may have been there in the venue. And it was at the very back of the stage, which is good because it kept it far enough away. It wasn't a very high dot pitch, and I did notice during the John Batiste big production number where he starts on a piano out in the audience and then ends up at another piano that is out back really close to the LED wall. When he got onto the piano close to the LED wall, you started to see a lot of moire, and that was the only problem I saw with it, because most of the time they kept it far enough in the background that it didn't have any issues in it. And it is, of course, a very easy way to change your stage, art direction with just changing a slide or a video in the background, as opposed to bringing in big set pieces or flying in stuff from the flies.
Next question.
Next one comes from Tlaloc, Miguel Lopez Waterman, our friend from Salisbury, Maryland. What tech does LTE and other cell services use that is so much better than Wi-Fi, and can it be mixed into a new Wi-Fi protocols?
Rupert?
I mean, of course, there are some technical and architectural differences, but ultimately the big difference is that LTE or any cell network is regulated and designed by the FCC, or whatever regulatory body. Those frequencies are divided up and managed and planned by, professional companies, and only a few of them dealing with known end devices. By comparison, the Wi-Fi is always going to be the wild, wild west.
Alex?
Most of it is actually the biggest problem that you get into with it is the handoff between transponders. So LTE covers a much larger distance. So you only see the drop off between LTE every once in a while. And you still have that problem where you get between two things, and you'll notice you'll go down to almost 0 bars, and then it pops back up again because you ended up on a new cell tower. And it does a pretty good job, but it actually fumbles fairly often, that handoff. It's just that it's a much longer range, so you don't notice it as much. Whereas with Wi-Fi, you're jumping from one AP to another often, and or getting out of range of it relatively quickly, and that's more problematic. It's also the wavelengths that Wi-Fi uses go through less than LTE.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. A Swiss boutique all-analog record label, and he has links there, records bands to a Studer deck through a Midas XL4 analog live console. Wouldn't it not be advisable to build your business on obsolete, unsupported equipment?
John?
I think unsupported would be maybe not the greatest term. Analog gear is very easy to support as long as you have the equipment, hardware, around and the technical expertise to replace that gear. I think that they are building a niche business based upon maybe a specific need. Does this work for everyone? No, but I think if it's working for them, then great. Lots of great, records, music was made on this type of gear, and some people want to go back through and get those same types of vibes.
Courtney?
Yeah, and this is probably designed for all vinyl release, which of course is an obsolete piece of gear to begin with. So if you're going to end up on an obsolete piece of gear, the purist who worship that obsolete sound would want to have it recorded on an on the chain that was used originally to create those analog records. So it sounds more accurate to the time period that they're trying to reproduce to get back that magical sound of analog recording and vinyl.
Next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston, the USA. In the Grammy Awards in Memoriam segment, which I mentioned earlier, they heavily focused on singers in the foreground, and I missed many mentions with the screen off or too distant. Was this bad planning? Was the execution off, or both?
Bill?
Probably a little bit of both, but for me, and this is my personal opinion, and Courtney may have some technical things, and I respect all the ways to come at this, but the Grammys is unique in that you can't really have the actors come up and act in the Oscars or the Emmys. You can have musicians come up and perform. So to the extent they rely on showing live music presented live, I think that enhances the differences in the Grammys presentation from all the other awards show. And I think that is the most charming thing. You're never going to be able to satisfy everybody on an in memoriam segment because you're always making decisions on who should be included, who shouldn't be included, how long can we spend on this and the rest. So there's always going to be dissatisfaction. Building it around live performance, I think, for me, was the saving grace.
Courtney?
They have a problem in that the Grammys, incorporate so many people in memoriam that, record producers, writers, et cetera, and their situation of presenting this year was they had 4 different singers and 4 different songs to cover that huge list of people, and they had 2 screens on either side, left and right, and so they tried to arrange it so that they could have the current singer, and sometimes there were 4 of them on the stage taking turns, and it was just kind of problematic to get a singer in the foreground and the image of the person being memorialized over their shoulders up in a large enough screen to be able to read the name, and that's the biggest problem. If they went to a wide shot that included all 4 of them, if all 4 of them were singing, the names ended up being too small of the people being memorialized in the background, and so it kind of distracted from the fact that they were trying to go through a long list of people and make sure they were all visible.
Next question.
Next one comes up from Eric Price in Kansas City. Any reason that adding a 4K 60 HDMI splitter between the AV Pro Connect UHD receiver and the House of Worship projector to get some signal to the Atem left me with no video for either? Unit works fine with direct connect to the computer.
Alex?
This is a problem we see with splitters. In fact, I have it with my 8x8. It's an EDID issue. It's just that they're not, the handshake isn't passing through.
John?
There's also a limit in how many times you can actually split a signal or HDMI after so many hops, or what's considered a hop in the chain. It can actually break it as well.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, would iOS development be a marketable skill set to learn in our field that could combine both creative skills and technical IT skills?
John?
Yes, I would spend time learning that. It's a great thing to do creatively. If you get good enough at it, it could be another thing to add to a package where you can be like a more of a turnkey solution for an event.
Alex?
Yeah, you absolutely can. And especially if you're into audio, I would look at AudioKit. So I'd look at the basic frameworks and then look at the AudioKit framework. We had those folks on in the past. It makes it a lot easier to build audio type software.
Next question.
And Douglas Carmichael has our last one in this section. What does everyone think of Coding with Chris as an iOS development course?
Alex?
It's my favorite. So I've been kind of working through some of those and figuring it out. I can't say that I'm a developer yet, but I think that his layout is very, very logical. You're actually building something. It's approachable. So I think that he does a really good job. It's probably the best iOS development training that I've seen so far.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your questions. Producers, great job. We're now going to transition over to speaking about branding and marketing 101. So Mondays are typically where we do our business innovation kind of conversations, and just thinking about a lot of the times when it comes to, say, branding or marketing, the first thing that comes to mind is actually people talk about social media. So this is an opportunity for us to just pull back the curtain a little bit, talk about what branding entails and marketing, because they are two different disciplines, and hopefully help even when you are branding yourself, and or if you're working on a project where you're able to kind of support as well, or just even understanding what those event planners or the marketers, what's really going on in their minds as they're coming to you with their projects and their ideas. And if we can get the first graphic put up on just branding, because I just thought that this would be a really good visual to help just when you think about branding, because it is what you are communicating to your audience. And I remember someone I'd worked with, they said this really, really well, like branding is not who you say you are, it's what people say about you. And that's where you're putting in the work to, whether it entails like the strategy behind how you communicate your company's values, your culture, your mission, your vision. And again, just looking at, that's just a snapshot. So it entails advertising, it entails strategy. It's not just your logo. It's not just your tagline. It's so much more. And that's why companies typically spend so much time to try to get that right, because that's what you're putting out there. That's the front facing part of it. And if we can go to the marketing one, and marketing, it's essentially all the tools, the practices, the processes that you use to get that brand message out. And you're communicating your promise, your position, your association. So that's where the channels that you use to market, your brand positioning, the channels, the tools that you are using to communicate the messaging, and just overall what your company's promise is to your customers and service perspective. So marketing has so many other elements as well, but just hopefully that kind of, and we're going to continue to talk about this for the next hour. So go ahead and put any questions that you have around branding, around marketing, and some of the things that even to try to help clarify this or bring some more clarity around this as well, is that whether you believe it or not, you yourself are a brand. Just thinking about when you think of someone, and I'll just like toss out even like office hours, like the culture here. When you think about office hours, it's innovation, it is technology, it is, failing forward, trying things, like just some of the words that you can think of when you think about this community. And then how the value of being a producer, being in after hours, all the labs, and each day that the different programming, that's what's shaping the brand of office hours. Now we're still, as we're developing the, just getting a lot of the technical parts together, the marketing part is going to come into play, but it's actually already taking place with word of mouth marketing. And oftentimes people, I've seen Rupert share on LinkedIn, and so many have shared on their personal websites. And so there's that marketing channel of how, come to office hours because you can learn X, Y, Z. So just thinking, from there, the messaging behind it, and then the tools that you use to communicate and get people to come to your business, your event, and tune in. And so, yeah, hopefully that kind of helps, and we'll continue to dive into this more. Nigel?
Yeah, I was going to separate out a bit more as you did the branding from the marketing. So let's deal with marketing first, and this may or may not be a helpful definition for people. I always think of marketing in its full breadth is understanding what your customers need and working out how to deliver it. And we tend to break that down by what we call the 4 or 5 Ps. So what is my product? What is my pricing? What is my packaging? What are my channels and what my place? And what is promotion? And I think promotion is sort of where branding starts to fit. And people tend to confuse the two. And I think it's really worth, if you're setting up your business, separating the two out, because you should be really clear about what your marketing strategy is and then what your branding and your promotional strategy is. And if you just make it about your promotional or your branding, you're going to derail yourself. Then within your promotion strategy, it really splits into 2 parts to me. There's the branding part, which is both tangible and intangible assets. So you do have some very tangible assets that you mentioned around your color and your name and your logo and your website and all of those things, which you can put your finger on. But what's more important, and often where you should start that conversation, is the intangible assets, which are much more about who are you as a company. I shared yesterday the Get to Why Simon Sinek stuff. Great place to start. Who are you? How do you describe yourself? What is your mission? Now, some people will go into what they call the compass, which is what is my purpose? What is my vision, mission, competitive advantage? And we can disappear into some of that if you want. But I think I would first work on the intangible side of my brand. I'd then think about what are the tangible assets that make that real. And then I move on to the other things around the actual promotion, whether it's through social media, whether it's through advertising, through whatever those channels are. But if you really are creating a business for the first time, spend the time on the marketing strategy before you get sucked into the brand strategy, because you will have the cart in front of the horse otherwise.
Bill?
I don't disagree with anything that Nigel just said. I think that it is smarter, but I do think you should take one little piece of your head to consider your brand, because your brand is literally everything that people think about what you're doing and how you package it. To the extent that brand value is carried on most major corporations' books, sometimes as an incredibly significant asset. I don't care whether you like the food or dislike the food, but when you think of McDonald's or you see those golden arches on the freeway as you're driving by, there are decades of perception built into how you feel about that. It may be that I need safe food for my family and I don't know who keeps cleanliness standards up, but you may have hooked that to your impression of that brand, and it will make you more likely to choose that as opposed to the diner next door that might not be equivalently well branded over the course of time. Companies zealously protect their brand. And my suggestion, the reason I think you should think about it a little bit, is that everything you do, I mean, did he show up on time? Was he prepared to do the work? Was she appropriate for the clients? Was this provider of services somebody I would recommend to my friends? All that goes into building a brand for that provider every single time you have an interaction with everybody you're going to work for the rest of your life. So paying some attention to what you want to represent to people is very important.
Yeah, the story that you're telling people. Alex?
I often think of marketing as going out and telling people that you're there, and branding is that once they get there, do they like you? so that do they feel comfortable with just that person? And the other thing to know is that branding, you're branding towards your target audience, and this gets back into some of the stuff that Nigel was talking about, because you may have a brand that a lot of people don't like. But the people who you're targeting do like. And so you have to really think about who is that audience out there, and who do I want to be? And the closer who you want to be is who you are, is the better. So it makes it much easier. So, but also, like Bill said, that every time you touch a client, it's a brand. It's every email. It's every. It's your sales order. It's how you pick up the phone, how you answer it, how you all of those things is your brand. And then the marketing is how you explicitly go out and try to get it. I have to admit that I spend most of my time thinking about brand and almost no time thinking about marketing. So that may be a mistake, but I think that you have to be very careful about doing heavy marketing without a good brand. So without a solid place when people go there or find out about you, a solid place that gives them like, oh, I want to be here. You want to develop that first, in my opinion. Then you market it something that has got a strong foundation. If you market too early, you end up marketing and getting people to show up at something that isn't compelling.
Yeah, and just to your point there, even thinking we all now know about the DVE store, but you mentioned for months there was this guy, he was in office hours serving, and then you found out that he was the person behind the DVE store, but he's already the brand of servant leader, servant first, give first, and then you have the experience with the DVE store that just then reinforces the brand culture, the brand identity. So just a very tangible description there. Courtney?
Yeah, I look at branding as if you're looking at advertising, specifically television commercials, for example, you'll see a institutional ad. They call them institutional ads or branding ads. Like one of the best examples is the original Apple Think Different campaign. They weren't advertising a single product, just the Apple name, and you didn't see it till the very end of the spot. And they had the Steve Jobs written copy about here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the troublemakers, the round pegs and the square holes, the ones who think differently. And they all the time showing you beautiful photographs of people like Gandhi and Ansel Adams and a lot of people who've never even used Apple products, but they're just associating that Apple name with a quality of life or a quality of people. And it tends to amplify identify the company's name with those people, and it elevates the thoughts of the market to include something that isn't necessarily a single product or single name, but it elevates the level of the product to a new level. You'll see that a lot in oil company advertising or sometimes beer advertising. They don't mention the product by name; they'll just British Petroleum at the end, and they'll see a lot of pretty pictures and a lot of people having a wonderful time with nothing relating to any products or services that company provide.
Rupert?
We just had a couple of cases from the panel here, just of how branding can, include some wider messaging. Can include the company culture and the mission and the values and things like that. And so, from that point of view, the branding also an audience for branding is also potential recruitment. Your talent pool, your people you want to hire or you may want to work with. Is your brand? Does it support their objectives too, and is your brand attractive to the types of people who you might want to not only have as clients but have as employees or talent on the internal side?
Good points. Jason?
I wanted to offer maybe a little bit of an addendum to what Alex was saying about spending a little bit, almost no time on marketing, and basically all the time on branding. If you're a firm that are less than 10 people can do what you do in the world, your marketing is your marketing is second hat. I'm completely with Liberty. It makes a lot of sense to do that first, and there are a few unless, and I know is one of those unless, but it's the exception, not the rule.
Great point, Bill.
I also wanted to emphasize, when Alex was talking, he reminded me that there is something about deciding how far you want to take your business and making that right-sized for you. In meetings with a lot of CEOs, they were constantly talking about at scale. What initiatives can we do that work at scale? Because their goal was always to increase the reach and the understanding of their business as far as they could. These are generally large companies. They wanted to become even larger. That's not necessarily the only way to grow a business. And I think Jason articulated that really well. Sometimes somebody with a particular set of skills just wants to brand themselves in a small community. They're not looking to do global marketing and the rest of that. They just want to become, the go-to person or organization for that niche. Those are both perfectly reasonable goals. So I do think it's sensible to spend a little time, because boy, if you're running a 25,000 person organization, your job is very different than if you're running a team of 10, 20, 30 highly skilled folks. You just spend your time entirely differently. So you should probably spend a little bit of time figuring out what's your real goal? How far do you really want to take this? And are you willing to put up with the stuff to get to that level?
Nigel?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in again because I think we started to say something that I actually fundamentally disagree with. And I think what we started to do was confusing marketing with marketing campaigns. And marketing campaigns are definitely part of marketing and they're part of the promotional side. But marketing is much more than that. And we've had conversations at office hours on Mondays where we've talked about what is my pricing strategy? How do you price? That is part of your marketing strategy. What services do I offer? What is my product? That is part of your marketing strategy. Where do I go to promote myself? That's part of your marketing strategy. What do I include in my bids? That's part of your marketing strategy. And I don't mind whether you're a one person or I've worked with Fortune 10 companies. I don't care how big you are. If you don't have that worked out first, and maybe it only takes half an hour to do, then your branding will go off the rails. And that's what, whenever I go in and try and reboot a marketing team, what I generally find is they don't have really clear answers to some of those. And specifically the question they can't answer is, what is your differentiating value proposition? What makes you different and why? And all of the stuff we talked about, the way that Apple does all its advertising, is easier, I should say, to do because they know the answer to some of those questions.
And to follow up to that, I just want to also come back and just with the pillars of like when you actually get into the marketing side of things, once you're clear on your brand, the value, the positioning, all of that, then it's when you get into your content marketing. That's when you get into your video marketing. That's when you get into social media marketing. Like all of those channels help you to communicate your value and your promise and your unique value, your unique sales proposition to your audience. So still on the position of branding and making sure that those root elements and what audience and who you serve and how you serve them and why come first so that you can effectively communicate that message through those channels. So let's get into the first question.
Chris Widner in Lafayette, Indiana requires me to put my tongue in my cheek. How high a heat do you recommend for a personalized branding iron?
Jason.
Are you making fun of our branding discussion? Okay, I'll answer your question. For rubber and leather between 325 and 400, softwoods between 650 and 750, and hardwoods or thermoset plastics between 850 or 750 and 850.
And I'll jump in and say that it depends. That's my Mickey answer of just thinking about if you are a public speaker, an author, a thought leader, then yes, that personal brand makes you're on 100 there because you want to reinforce whatever the subject matter that you're speaking about, that you're strong on, that really putting that foot first. If it is a company and an organization, well, then your personal brand, the idea about it depends is, are you the face of the company's brand, or is it really more the value of what the company does, what you offer? So there it might be a 70, still important, but that, the company going first. And if you are an independent contractor, then it's a mixture of both what you're able to do, but then also who you are and that identity that comes there. Alex?
Yeah, I will, to underline what Jason was talking about, you'll think that you can just brand your Pelican cases, but if you keep the brand on too long, I can tell you this from experience, it warps the the Pelican case in a weird way that doesn't really turn
It's one of the few ways to avoid the warranty too.
We really wanted to make it look just like the red cases that, the red camera cases. And we tried to reproduce it. It's harder than it looks. So anyway, we ruined a couple Pelican cases that way. But from a branding perspective, just remember it's a long game. Branding is the long game. Marketing is the shorter game, and everything that you do. I think I'm always surprised watching Twitter and especially LinkedIn, your personal brand is what you put up there, and so I'm always kind of surprised what people are willing to put on Twitter and pretty much any social platform. You just need to look at it like this is my personal brand, and this will affect how I get hired and who will hire me and what confidence they have in me. And so you want to be conscious of that. I had a job that I lost for one tweet that was done 8 years before. Like literally, I couldn't find it because Twitter doesn't search back that far. But there are services that do. By the way, as soon as you tweet something, whether you delete it or not, there's services that hoover up everything, and when they do background checks on you, they look at all of it. And so you want to be very, very careful. And that was back in the days when it was a 2008 tweet. It was back when we didn't think Twitter meant anything. So you just want to be very, very careful about what you put out there.
Right. And even the things you like, because that shows up in other people's feeds and you're automatically connected to that kind of content. Bill?
Don't look yourself up on the Wayback Machine. And 2 words, laser etching. That's all I'm going to say.
Next question.
Chris Widner in Lafayette, Indiana says, with social media platforms changing their resolution and style guides all the time, how can a small marketer best keep up with presenting their brand in the best light on all of them?
Wow, great question. Is just trying your best to use whatever, once those, they send out the new dimension sizes or whatnot, don't be too slow to using them, because typically that they will become the standard. And then that way, that you're at the highest level, because when it does change, because I was even looking back at some Instagram posts and how long ago, how they now show up. So it's all about trying to stay on top of it as best as possible, whether that's following the likes of Social Media Examiner, Content Marketing World, just some of those places where, they also have the inside scoop with being a media outlet. Alex?
And as much as you can, you want to be native to whatever that platform is. So those platforms will actually, the users will penalize you, and so will the platform if you start using other formats inside that platform. So you have to know, as you start to go down this path, that these platforms they want to be the one, right? They want to be, your one, even though you're dating all of them. They think that they're the one, and they want everything to be the way that they are designed to work. So when you take your YouTube 16:9 and put it into your Instagram, when you take your Instagram and put it into TikTok, when you take, all of those things are things that that don't look good in those formats, and so the users are less likely to like it. The platforms actually penalize you for it. The other thing you have to know is that cross linking. I will do cross linking, but I do it carefully and not very often, because there's huge penalties on those platforms for cross linking to other platforms. So you just need to always be conscious that you're if I post a YouTube link on Twitter, I know the amplification of my tweets after that for the next week will be lower. All of them. That's, so you have to be kind of conscious of the penalties that come with cross-linking between social platforms.
Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, in California, in the U.S. says, what tools do you utilize for branding and marketing?
Nigel?
Yeah, so I think if you do a quick Google search, you'll find 1,000 different documents and structures, and just search for a basic marketing plan or a basic branding plan. Again, I'm going to say, go back to Simon Sinek's Get to Why. You'll find it on YouTube. I think the most valuable thing you can do across all of this is understand your why. Why is it you do what you do, not what do you do? And I think if you can just follow that video and work that out, then lots of the rest of this will spring from that. And there are 1,000 techniques to do that, but that's really the place I would start.
Alex?
First of all, a constant drone of information that is around your, serving your market. The number one way that I've marketed forever I mean, like literally since the early 90s have been serving the market. Find ways, like I think that, again, we don't want to embarrass Guy, but Guy does this really well. So being part of the panel here without talking about what he does, when you immediately throw it out there, like, and now you can find this at blah, 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 you've given up all the what you built, so you've used it up, you fired it off, and so you want to be very careful and keep that powder dry, and you don't ever have to use it really, and a lot of times when you're serving the market, one of the ways I think about this is that you're building, when you're serving your market, you're building karmic credit, in your market. And when you're impacting a lot of people, you're building that karmic credit. And occasionally you may convert that karmic credit to cash, but you want to be very careful of doing that because the transfer rates are very bad. So you want to be, and so you have to be very careful about that. And you just want to just keep serving the market. It pops I know it sounds crazy and you have to kind of it sounds like you're just trying to, it's an act of faith, but when you truly serve the market, not trying to pull something out of it directly and just do your thing and don't have a lot of quid pro quos, don't try to figure out how you're going to put your brand in front of everybody. It works out. It works out every time. Like it just does. After 30 years of this, serving your market works out, and so you want to be thinking about that as far as tools go. As far as marketing tools, as far as I'm concerned, of all the stuff that we've used, a strong Twitter account helps a lot, but you have to keep on. It's something that you do constantly, and you constantly manage that. Also, Google from a pure marketing campaign, if you know what you're doing, Google AdWords and Facebook, pretty useful. As far as the marketing campaigns go, they're kind of a magical, which is why why they have everybody so much up in arms, because if you know how but you have to remember that, again, this gets back into marketing and branding. For like Google AdWords, it matters what site page you go to and what people do on that page that affects the effectiveness of the marketing campaign. You're not just sending them to a page. You want to send them to a page where they're going to take an action because Google's measuring that, and so you want to know how those tools work, because those tracking bits that everyone asks you whether they can have or not, those are all, it's not just them wanting to track you. It's them wanting to show performance against the ad campaigns. And so you just have to know, what that means when you take those things out of it. And then finally, for branding, I would say, an Atem Mini, a good camera, a good mic. You should not underestimate the level of respect that you get in a meeting with clients when you look and sound good, and especially when you look a lot better and sound a lot better than everyone that's in the meeting. People, it shouldn't make any difference. It shouldn't, but it does. So you want to think about that.
Bill?
100% everything that Alex said. On top of that, remember that it's also not just serving your brand, it's also serving the people, the individual people that you come in contact with. And that is a part of what Alex is talking about, but it's really taking your clients' needs seriously, working hard to figure out what they are, trying to be proactive about that. That helps you build the brand that you are expressing through everything else you're doing. And, the reason I started writing for magazines and stuff like that is because I just thought, well, people are having a struggling time with this. Maybe I can help. And my wife helped me simplify and start learning how to write better and things like that. And the next thing you know, people were coming up to me to say hi at things that I had no idea I was doing anything, but that basic, I'm just doing who I am and trying to project it out there and let it be what it is. Some people will hate what I'm saying. Some people will like what I'm saying, but I'm being honest about these are my opinions. And I am trying to work with individuals like I may be able to help them if I work hard enough at it. That really made all the difference for me.
Yeah, and just some other tools and resources as well. HubSpot, Hootsuite, and MailChimp. And because MailChimp is the email service, but a lot of these people who have been, or companies that have been in the game for a long time, and I'm talking about decades in the digital marketing space, they're also, because you as a part of their target audience, they want you to be there and constantly look to them as a resource. So they provide the latest information on what's changing across marketing and how to help you get started. So just as tools that you can use, both using them for marketing, but then also using them for research. Going back to the branding side of things, even if you just Google branding templates or what is branding, typically there'll be something that you can find where it'll have some of those bullet points, because ultimately the work that you need to do when it does come to branding is really inner work of you sitting down and saying, well, how do I want to communicate? How are we communicating? So it's a lot of introspective work that needs to be done. And Guy?
Yeah, we use, from a technical standpoint, we do use some off-the-shelf tools, but from a heart standpoint, I mean, you're right, Liberty, it's just truly serving your audience. And so our mission is to help people create better video, and we've been doing this for a long time. The company's now 18 years old, and Bill may remember me from like the dvinfo.net forum days.
Totally did.
We would just go in there and help serve the market. We would answer questions. I would go in there and answer, my goal was to answer 10 questions a day. So I would just go in there first thing in the morning, answer 10 questions a day. And if it was a super popular question, I would go and make a video on it. And I figured if a lot of people I would sort the forum by most popular questions, and that's my content to go make videos. And so I made a bunch of videos, and some of them got popular, and that's it. I just ask myself all the time, am I truly serving the market? And I'll ask that in our sales team meetings, like, are we in line with our mission of helping people create better video? And so that just helps us, move forward. We're in a weird position where we're not the biggest, we're not B&H, we're not the 800-pound gorilla, and we're not super small anymore. So it's kind of trying, and I'm still learning, but we do use an outside agency to do our Google SEO stuff. So they use Sprout Social, so that keeps track of all our Instagram and all that stuff. So that with Basecamp, those are the two tools that we use from a technical standpoint.
Good info. Alex?
Yeah, and the other one that I would say is just working with other people that, like we're doing here. Like we, as a group, we are all producing a show that no one of us could do. And you see this with YouTubers a lot, where they're doing collaborations with each other, and that's cross-pollinating all of those audiences between them, which is very effective. So it's not necessarily a technical tool, but it is a methodology that tends to work really well.
Next question.
Felidi in Bali, Indonesia is back up again, this time with, as a small production studio in soft launch, is it too edgy to push out a tagline like, "We shoot people like you"?
Courtney?
While that's, of course, very clever, I think it steps a little bit over the line of edgy. Anytime you're implying violence against your possible customers in today's cancel culture and the reactions that can happen on social media, I think that could be used against you fairly easily. So I'd probably stay away from anything that suggests violence.
Alex?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to be edgy and then not get yourself into trouble somewhere down the road. There's a lot of things where people's marketing campaigns went horribly sideways because they were trying to be funny and then something horrible happened in the world that connects it, and it's very hard to pull that back. So I think I would be very careful, especially and you're in a different country, so I don't know how that handles it. I know in the United States that would be pretty hard, to manage.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to qualify it as well, because especially where we are in this digital space, is like people are looking for information that pertains to them. That's why you hear a lot of conversations about niche marketing and niching down. So to your point of like, who are those people that you're shooting like add that in there somewhere. And then also thinking about it, flashy and edgy is cool, but does that work for your SEO? And that's your search engine optimization. So I would encourage you to even spend some time on Google and search keywords of what you would like, the audience that you're trying to reach, and then see what words come around there. And that could be a way to just, again, qualify who you're trying to reach. Alex?
One thing to remember is that, a lot of people are, when someone's attracted to somebody else, it's rarely about how they feel about that person, but how they feel about themselves with that person. And so that person able to, and so you want to be careful. You want to think about how do people feel? Like, for instance, I would never buy any of the, this for dummies, because I don't think I'm a dummy. So I don't think I'm a dummy. And so I wouldn't buy any of the books. And so all the books were, I'm sure it worked. They sold enough that there was enough people that were willing to say they were dummies. But it was just like, I just found it insulting. And so I wouldn't do it. On the other hand, you can look at things going the other way. It's just risky. In Thailand, they did an ad campaign, and this would have been in the early 90s. They made up a beer. The newspaper wanted to prove how powerful they were within Bangkok. And so they built a beer that didn't exist called, I think it was called Triple X or something like that, beer. And the one thing you talk about with beer is they always talk about how it tastes, but you never talk about the fact that it gets you drunk, and so all they talked about was they had a guy at a bar drinking with a pillow on the back of his head. It said, and they're talking about the alcohol content in the beer, they just went all the way there. And there were so many requests for it that they had to build a brewery to make the beer because there was all these people asking for that beer at all these bars. And of course it helped the advertising. So you can go that other way, but it can go, no matter how well it can go bad pretty quickly as well.
Bill?
We often talk about authenticity as a piece of this, and that is really a very serious thing. So my answer to your question, is it too edgy? Is it authentic to you, and are you willing to accept the consequences of being edgier? I mean, let's face it, if I walk into a place with heavy eyeshadow and a fringed vest, I look like an idiot because that's not authentically who I am. If a rock star walks into with that same thing, everybody's going, that's him or her. That's it. That's fine. The brand and the marketing are consistent. You're an edgy, crazy rock star. You look different than if you're a video producer in San Diego. So just understand that alignment of authenticity is one of the pieces of your brand. You can go there, but if you go there, go all the way there. That's who you're going to brand yourself as.
Next question.
Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina. How do you want to use or see other brands use NFTs to build and solidify their communities?
Alex?
I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities with NFTs. I do think that they are a little risky right now, and we don't know what they're going to do. Like, we don't know where they're all going to go. And so, but I do think that what we talk a lot about internally is the idea of building what we call artifacts. So artifacts are things that when you go to something, I'm going to give you something that may have value. So back in the day, you'd carry a ticket stub. You bought something there. There was some piece of the concert that you can take away that was a physical item that reminded you of it that might have value in the future. And I think that it's dangerous right now to get people to buy things because it could go the opposite way. If it loses value dramatically, now you have unfulfilled expectations, which is a really bad way to build your brand. And so unfulfilled expectations are like the worst way to build your brand. So I think that NFTs, like, hey, if it goes well, people want to collect them, like trading cards, like signed books, like signatures, like all those things. We want to give those to people, and that's what we're looking at in some of the campaigns that we're working on. Is how do we give things to people that may have value in the future, where they want to hang on to them. It doesn't mean that we'll never go to selling things, but I think in the early days, when you don't know what the values are going to be, you want to look at things that get them excited to be there and get them excited that they got something, but not necessarily have them pay for it outright or pay very much for it.
I think what I'd like to see is like a lot of these brands over the past few years that have been talking about their commitment to whether it be diversity or women or whatnot. There are a lot of these groups that are now growing in the NFT space. So possibly aligning. So it's not that it's necessarily anything new or revolutionary, but actually just the brand promise that they have is collaborate with some of these creators who are doing some things. I was on a space last week where it was a group of educators and them talking about what they're doing with kids in NFTs and in the financial space. So that's a perfect opportunity for a brand to jump in and help support some of these missions. And from that, that because the NFT space is so new, but it's also very rich, it'd be a great opportunity to just see some of that value that they've been talking about, see that delivered. Jason?
It's difficult to see where NFTs will end up, but I would say a good kind of a good equivalent would be a challenge coin. A challenge coin is actually, if you think about it, very similar to a digital NFT. And if you get one from the president, what it says is, I met the president. The president handed me this coin. To me, an NFT in that sort of space, if you think of it like a challenge coin, it does have promise.
Alex?
And just to define a challenge coin that Jason was talking about, this is something within our government. Most agencies, almost all agencies, all the different bases and different agencies all have little coins that represent them. And if you walk into someone's place that's worked with a lot of agencies, you'll see a table, oftentimes a glass table with just hundreds of them that they give each other. And this is it's a great idea from Jason's perspective to think of these as challenge coins, because I think NFTs are a great way to say, I was there and here's a challenge coin. Because usually what happens is you're going to serve an agency and someone will just walk up to you and just kind of hand you one. Like it's not like that. There's no ceremony. They just kind of slip you like, thanks, man. And for many of us, the challenge coin is more valuable than anything they would have paid us. Like, well, not anything, but for the day, you can get paid for the day, but you can get a challenge coin. One group has a challenge coin with a golf thing that pops out, which is the funniest challenge coin that I have. Anyway.
Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California says, what mistakes have you made? It's going to take forever.
That's great question. That's
just
where the learnings come from, Rupert.
Just a simple example, domain names that are like too long to either that it's too long that anybody's not going to want to type it, or there's too much room for error. Some very clever variation on spelling that you've chosen, and then trying to explain that or spell it out to each person when you're trying to tell them your email or your website. It's just too much of a pain. You want something that's quick and simple, ideally quick and simple, but just where there's no mistaking it.
Nigel?
I, again, made many of these. I think the one I always remember is we created a branding strategy that was frankly brilliant and very clever and about 5 years ahead of the market. And then we didn't invest enough or hold on enough to make it stick. And hindsight back, we look now and we go, well, everybody uses that convention nowadays. But we just hadn't done the work to see whether what was very clever to us was actually going to resonate enough with the audience without the investment to explain it.
Good. Courtney?
Now, this isn't a mistake that I made, but I've observed other people. Understand, not me. But if you're branding your product, and for example, in teleprompting, I'll give you one example, is award shows a lot of times will ask you to do the show for free for a credit at the end of the awards. And if it's out of your control, if you're a teleprompter, you can get drunk people up on the stage and complain about the teleprompter, or that's the wrong thing, or I don't know, I can't see that, and then of course you're forever associated with that negative reaction to your product because your brand appears in the credits. The other thing is, so if you're of good branding is the company Hoodman that makes little shades for video monitors that directors look in on the set. So in almost every behind-the-scenes footage you see of a movie being made, you see that Hoodman logo emblazoned on the side of that little cover on the monitors that the directors are looking in. So it's in a lot. And that's an example of good branding where they make a product that really can't go wrong. It's a simple product and it can't be blamed for anything. Another example of a bad one is when Microsoft took over product placement for the NFL for them to use tablets on the sidelines. And there were a lot of shots of
that was so bad.
People remember this of coaches and assistant coaches complaining about them just throwing the Microsoft tablet across the room because they couldn't get it to work, and they had the Windows logo on the back of it, incredibly emblazoned, and it creates a huge amount of branding bad publicity. So you got to be very careful that your product is up to the task. If you're going to put your logo and branding on it, it's going to be visible to millions of people. You better make darn sure it works.
Yeah. And just to highlight a point that you shared there, Courtney, is the associating your brand with some other brand that might not be in alignment or just the quality, because that's ultimately going to reflect back on you. So just highlighting that's an excellent point. Alex?
I'll start with a technical one. A technical one was when I was my first marketing job was working for Prime Sports Network, building print ads. And I didn't, I was an intern that I just persuaded them that I knew enough to do this. And they finally, they fired their ad agency and paid me $7.50 an hour or whatever to do it instead. And I didn't know a lot about dot gain. So I sent an ad to the Albuquerque newspaper. It was a long ad. And it had and I gave it the dot gain of in the Quark file. It had a dot gain of I think 133 or something like that, which is magazine dot gain, and it was going to a newspaper. So when it came out, it was just black. It was like one black square. And what happens is they cut it out and they send it back to you. There's proof that it went into the newspaper, so they always cut these out. We got the cutout out. My boss was not amused. Anyway, so anyway, it was okay. They laughed because they were saving so much money paying this kid nothing to do ads. So they figured that was coming with the territory. Probably the worst one that I did as I got my company started, DV Garage, was that I announced a product, the 3D toolkit, and then it took me months. Like we sold lots of them, thousands of them, and then it took me months to actually deliver it. And they it was just really, that's a really hard thing to, you just end up with a lot of. And when people got it, they loved it. It was still probably better training than most, but I learned very quickly to be very careful about announcing things that I don't know I can get done, and so, that was a big lesson for me because, they say that trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. So you have to be very careful about what you say you can do versus what you actually can do. And then the last one was we were doing something where we were, it was a hangout and the computer crashed, and, we had decided for whatever reason to put the PixelCore logo on all of our computers. So when it crashes, it's not works. It goes out to a broadcast that just says PixelCore. Like we're the ones that screwed this up. So it was only there for a second, but I can tell you that no computers had the PixelCore logo on it after that. Like on the screen. I was like, if it's going to crash, we just want a gray screen. Yeah.
Guy.
Yeah, this one didn't dawn on me until a friend who wrote the book, YouTube Secrets. His name is Benji Travis. He writes about my mistake in his book. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. So we got this question in the forums over and over again. How do I record gameplay? And so this was an audience that I'm not used to serving. So, teenagers in the basement. And so I made this video on the Blackmagic Intensity Pro card. Got a ton of views, was a total hit the first year. The second year, a different product came out that was half the price. And so now all these kids formed like an alliance and just started like leaving really bad comments in my video. And I was reading these, and I used to be, a trainer. So I would go out and I would teach even people at NASA, CNN. And so I took these comments like super personally, and I let it get to me. I stopped making videos for a couple of years because I let it get to me. So one thing is to just have some thick skin and then know your audience.
Such a good lesson. Such a good lesson. I would say too, and as it relates even to working in the event space, is consistency. So once you do all this work for your marketing, for your branding, you've got to be consistent out there, because, if you show up really hard for your community and then all of a sudden you disappear, that just hurts brand and trust. Because I know during the holidays I was like burnt out, exhausted, and wasn't posting. Sure, you could find me if you emailed, but it does impact. So then I just had to go really hard at the beginning of the year. This more speaking personal brand perspective. And then the other one is your call to action. Like, it's great to put content out, but then if you're not letting people know now, how can they work with you or click here or go here or schedule, like just missing those things. Sometimes you're so zealous to like share all this great information, but there's a return on the time that you put in that. So I know those are like two areas that I've definitely got to work on personally. Bill?
I hate even going back to this, but I did. So this is a lesson that stuck with me. It still today makes me feel horrible to think back on it. I got hired for my first on-camera pitch session from a local ad agency, and it was on TV. So we went to the TV station to do it. And that day, I allowed plenty of time, showered, dressed nicely, everything. I thought, man, I'm really ready. But through a series of unfortunate accidents, including 2 traffic jams on my way in, I arrived at the TV station literally 1 minute after the top of the hour when I should have been there. And so I walked into the studio only to see one of their local weather guys on camera doing the thing because I was 1 minute late. That series of ads ran for about 5 years, and I had to watch that guy who stepped into a gig that I had locked make all that money and increase his presence rather than me doing it because I hadn't left enough margin and I was 1 minute late. That lesson has stuck with me to this day.
Wow. Next question.
Claire McFarland in Boston. I said, I've had success with brand books to define high-level vision down to technical details, internal and external versions. What is your experience with these?
Rupert?
I'd say the bigger the brand or the bigger the company, the bigger the branding book or the bigger the guidelines. There's more and more documentation and things that come with their messaging or their logos or their things like that. And I just find it's always important to respect all those things, of course, and to just appreciate that you may not appreciate all the reasons that all those things are there. Just some simple examples are that it may include artwork that's been properly licensed, and that's what should be used. It may include contractual implications about logos not appearing next to other logos, and these days, of course, even things like accessibility, proper spacing and color schemes that the company's decided that puts them in the best position for accessibility, for example.
Nigel?
I think it's an important discipline. If you don't have one, to write one. Don't try and write it on your own. It's a team sport. But it's a valuable thing to walk through, and you can Google what goes in a brand book. It's really a valuable thing for the team, you and one other person, to do, to really agree on some of these issues.
Jason?
Brand books, or more commonly known in the biz as lookbooks, are amazing. And I think that they should be the pinnacle of clean. They should be the pinnacle of easy to understand. If you can't implement your own brand guidelines in your lookbook, then you're doing a lot wrong. But what's really nice about defining these things is that, if an intern, for example, has to make letterhead for a new department, there's no question about how it should be done. They don't have to ask anybody. So just like a business plan answers a lot of questions that have yet to be asked, a lookbook to me is a very critical part of any sort of brand consistency.
Bill?
It may just be regional languages to me, but Jason, I've never heard it as a lookbook. A brand book is a very specific thing that has all the specifications for how that brand is presented in public, down to literally font size, position, logo use. When you can't use the logos, you can put it in the upper left, but you cannot ever put it in the bottom right. Those and my wife's a project manager and has worked on multiple brand books for relatively large brands. They go deeply, deeply, deeply into detail as to the brand standards that are acceptable for any public-facing communications, and they do change a bit over time. For a while we had brand books and they didn't have social considered, and now there's going to be big sections on how you use things like logos, typography, and things like that in all these relatively new spaces, because the rules of a print ad for the newspaper 25 years ago and the ones for a dynamic website that might be changing in orientation on different devices and things like that are just very different. And a good brand book will address all of those things so that there's consistency in brand presentation across all media in all uses.
Alex?
One of the things that we've seen a move towards is the brand books used to be in PDF, and now they're almost all on the web. And that's because it allows them to change. Oftentimes you can download it, but you always want to refer back to the link. And there's some, I can't think of them right now, but there's some web platforms that do this. But essentially, that it allows them to keep on updating them as needed, as opposed to putting out a PDF.
Yeah, Notion is one of those tools that we've seen some clients send across for like having their brand books.
Yeah.
Jason?
Just one addendum. Bill is absolutely correct, and a lookbook is the same thing. It's just slang.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, and I just wanted to note, in other industries, for example, in advertising, a lookbook often refers to how the creative team imagines this campaign being put together. So it's going to have more a visual direction for the artistic members of the team than it is specifications. So we often see lookbooks from photographers. Show me your lookbook. Show me what kind of stuff you did. Give me something moody. Give me something clean and fresh. Those kind of things. A look for an ad is a different kind of a guide.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, for someone with a diversity of skill sets, how do you focus your branding and marketing? Do you look at the most in-demand skill set?
You look at who you're speaking to. So if you are speaking to an audience that maybe they need more of your audio experience, well, you're not going to present to them all that you know about virtual events or things along those lines. So you just really want to be specific in understanding who are you speaking to. And sometimes that's even platform wise. Twitter is heavily tech and gaming and startup. And so you present those skill sets to that audience because you know that they'll receive it. Maybe on LinkedIn, you're speaking about something, another part of your skill set. So yeah, that would be the consideration and recommendation I would say is like thinking about who you're speaking to, what they need to hear, and then presenting yourself in a way that they will understand. Courtney?
You have to be careful about pigeonholing, as someone who had a diversity of skill sets, and I've worked at a number of different jobs, and people will see me on the set and think I'm doing the other skill set when I'm doing a different skill set. And you tend to get typed and pigeonholed. And so people don't understand people that have a diversity of skills, and they'll think, why is he doing this? He's a sound mixer. Why is he doing, video playback? I thought he was a sound mixer. So you tend to be, it kind of dilutes your importance in the marketplace with, if you're marketing yourself through several skill sets. You might be better off to focus on one and go with that. That's your strongest skill, and put your effort into that, because you have a tendency to dilute your brand by going across several skill sets.
Alex?
I do agree that you can dilute the brand by having, especially if it's public or you see a lot of folks as a company, you can oftentimes have different verticals. And a lot of times our materials where we didn't really do that much in the area of marketing, but the materials that we sent to people were very customized. If it was a government group, it was built for them. If it was a corporate group, it was built for them. It was an entertainment built for them, and it said the same things, but it packaged it much differently. All the example images that we used, all the things that we backed it up with, were dependent on who we were talking to. We didn't have just one that we sent out. So that's kind of something to kind of think about.
Next question.
Craig McFarlane in Boston says, what aspects of branding work are best to pull in an expert?
Alex?
All of them? As best you can. If you're really good at something, it's fine. But I think that the ones that stand out a lot are search engine optimization. SEO is a pretty deep world. And you kind of want to really think about that. Designers are going to make you look a lot better. Copywriters are going to make you look better. The person that does your website is going to make you look better. So they're all areas that I would look at it. You just have to decide if those are true areas of strength for you, then do it yourself, but be very careful of how much time that's going to take as well. You got to, when you start holding on to things, think about how much you're paying yourself, and, because that's what it's costing you, because you could be doing something else especially if you're an executive. And so if you've started this company, if you have the money to do it, you want to find the right specialists in those areas as best you can, and let them work for you.
Nigel?
Yeah, 100% agree with that. The more science there is, the more specialists you should have. SEO, SEM, all of that stuff has become rocket science to most of us. Understanding the Google algorithms and how they've changed would be a perfect place to really get people involved. I would also tell you that enthusiastic amateurs in graphics and design have a lot of fun. Professionals get there a lot faster, and you should really use a professional where you can to do that sort of work.
Bill?
I also just want to make a note. It is possible. It's expensive, and most people don't do it, to get out a little over your skis with this. In other words, what I'm saying is that you can have a fabulous business card that looks gorgeous, and you cannot be very good at any of the things your business card has on it in the mice type below your name. And so you're going to present yourself like a superstar in, that field, and all of a sudden you show up to work and you don't have the chops for it. So all I'm saying is that try to be consistent about what you can do and be authentic about it. If you are just starting out, there's nothing wrong with looking like you're starting out and branding yourself as a hardworking generalist who's trying to learn, as opposed to I can make it look like I'm really the top dog in this field when you are not. Just saying.
Very true. Next question.
Juan C. Robles in Mexico says, what are the minimum branding topics that should be met in any business?
Nigel?
Well, I think the obvious answer is, your brand, your name, the look and feel, the brand book as was described before. But I'll give you one that may be a bit harder for a very creative community to come to terms with, which is clarity about your value proposition. What value are you bringing in the market? And there are, if you Google value proposition, you can find 100 different ways to do it. But invariably, when I find a brand or a team that is not working in the market, it's because they're not clear about what their value proposition is, or they all think they know what it is and they all think it's different.
Alex?
Yeah, so I would say quality of work and responsive and useful communication with your clients. Like that is that's the core of your brand, is that you're producing great work at whatever level that you're at, and that you're responsive, and you have a useful communication with your clients and all partners.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Alex, would a Logitech Brio be enough of a good camera, or should I spring for the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 4K and Atem?
Alex?
I mean, the Brio's fine, but I will say it just depends on the level of client. So if you're working with, billion-dollar companies, I would get a 6K, or a 4K at least. If you're doing smaller things, I think that just having a really solid webcam and a good mic is fine. But it does make a difference, and you want to play. It just depends on the scale at which you're playing.
Bill?
And I'm just saying the camera is one piece of this, but you can get a Brio to look better than some other cameras by doing a really good set and good lighting and making sure the audio is good and the rest of that. I mean, if I took this camera and separated and put in a Brio, some people would notice the difference in the way the shot looks, but it wouldn't look stupid or inappropriate. So just remember that it's kind of everything working together. It's not just the camera that makes things all look professional.
And Alex?
With all marketing and branding, just remember that it's not what people notice, it's how they feel. And so you just really have to think about that when they look at the site, when they look at what you're doing. So they may not be able to notice the difference between two different cameras, but it will feel different to them. And that happens often, even with visual effects. Like that thing didn't look like it felt like it was right. They can't know what that is, but it's whether they believe it or not.
Yeah, we'll have to come back and talk more about the emotional part, because that's definitely a key part when it comes to the branding conversation. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Guy, I like your approach for answering 10 questions a day in forums related to a topic. How do you balance being helpful while not undercutting the market?
I would say it's being a value-added reseller. So we are what you would also call a box shifter. So we do have some crazy data stuff that we can do with a program that it's called NetSuite. It's a way that we can push data into many places. So we had to be on both sides of the coin. So I can do things where one-on-one I'm able to help somebody like John Wallace and go deep into his live streaming system, or most anybody on this panel. I could answer the tech. I walk the walk. That's the difference, is the guys like us that can actually do this stuff, we're in demand. So we don't have to undercut. We charge full price. So that's the value add.
And then also he's answering questions for his audience. So it's a matter of serving so that, because they have those questions, they can go somewhere else to find the answer to those questions, or because Guy is serving them and answering their questions, Guy and his team, that it continues to reinforce the value that they provide. And there's a good book. I haven't read it yet, but it's highly recommended, of like 1,000 True Fans, and like the idea of building that as you're building your community to do everything that you can to ensure that they have exactly what they need and how that supports your business. Alex?
Yeah, and if you're in somebody else's forum, usually those forums are pretty big areas, and so if you're adding 10 questions a day is often not a big portion of the number of questions that are being answered on any given day. So usually you don't overpower those types of things, but it is a great way. We're doing what I think is the next generation of that, which is we're answering questions here every day, and so and it is important to kind of look at it. And for me, for instance, I generally, when I'm not being a panelist, I generally only answer questions at the end. And that's I learned that here over time that it was better for the panelists if I attempt not to answer the question. And what we did is we have better answers because the panel knows their subject matters better than I do.
Bill?
And practice, practice, practice. I didn't get to be even a close to decent answer of questions in writing when I was doing it for VideoMaker and other places until I had done it for a while. So you have to practice this stuff. You'll notice that Alex is constantly pushing us in terms of giving us hints about be more concise, try to hit the ball, directly, don't wander around and things like that. And that is a way we are learning to be better at this interaction. And so you have to do that for yourself. If you want to be a great question answerer in any of your social feeds, do it and find some people that you trust to give you feedback on it so they can say, you really didn't need those 3 sentences in the middle. You went off on a tangent. That's not core to answering the question. Get better. John?
I'll just add this. Having the answer and be able to execute on what that answer is different. So when I think about undercutting markets, the people of this panel, they're experts for a reason. They've been doing it for a long time. So having the answer is going to help you build better solutions, knowing what is possible, not just, hey, and now I can go do this because it's easy.
Next question.
Nathan Cashin in Oregon City, Oregon says, speaking of domain names, how important are they for SEO? For example, would bestserviceinyourcity.com or a similar improve your results on Google?
Jason?
What a wonderful question. The short answer is no, absolutely not. The most important things about a domain name are that they are easy to say, easy to spell, or should I say impossible to misspell, and then easy to remember. As far as the rest of it with respect to SEO, that's really just about teaching Google where you fit in the greater scheme of the internet writ large. And the domain name itself doesn't really have anything directly to do with that. It's something, best this in that is something that should be said about you, not something that you say about yourself. If I were to look straight into the camera and say I'm a very modest person, how would that come across? There you go.
Rupert?
Yeah, I'd agree exactly with Jason, especially using words like best. I mean, that's very objective. I'd just stay away from that completely. In terms of SEO, there's a dozen, perhaps even far more things that are way more higher priority than, the domain name itself. But just like Jason says, the one way in which it can be catchy, though, is if you do get yourself onto the search results page, if you have a domain name that looks relevant to the user, their eye might be drawn to it. Algorithmically, I don't think it has much value.
John?
I used to be in this business, and there's about 70 signals that Google uses for domain ranking. Domain authority still, after 25 years, is how many external links are linking into your site. And so that's the real value. A domain name like this won't help you at all.
Courtney?
Well, one thing you have to watch out for in domain naming is competition. You have to look at what's out there before you register your domain. And if you register a domain that's similar to somebody else who has a similar domain with a different extension, like .biz, .com instead of .biz, or .biz instead of .com, they're going to click on the other one that's more common, the .com first. And if it's a competitor, that's going to send traffic to one of your competitors. So I advise you to register your trademark, because that can be used to combat people that will create a similar URL to yours, or and even if search engine optimization doesn't make any difference, if one of the top 5 results are not you, but are sound-alike names or similar names or something, the same name with a dash in the middle of it, and so on, and they happen to get more mentions than you, so they get optimized earlier. If you register your trademark, you can threaten to file suit against them for violating your trademark with a similar-sounding name on the internet if they're in the same service or a similar product to what you're selling. And that's happened to me, and I've been able to take people who had been using a .com URL for several years, but since I had been using that trademark for 10 years before that, I was able to get them to turn that actual domain over to me because I had a registered trademark, and I could sue them for all the business that they did under their registered domain up until that point. So register your trademark.
Why Mondays in the business conversation is so valuable. Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California is up next with, could we do a ruthless review of branding and or marketing?
Alex?
I think we could do that in after hours. I think I probably wouldn't do it on YouTube, but I think that an after hours session could make a big difference if people want to put their stuff up and get some feedback on it. Absolutely.
Wonderful. And there we have it. Another hour, second hour, branding and marketing 101. Thank you to all of the producers and all of your fantastic questions. To our panelists, thank you for sharing your wins, your losses, and all of that insight. If you do want to learn more about the schedule for the week, head over to officehours.global. And for everyone else, we'll see you in after hours.
Liberty did a good job again.
Yeah, that was really good.
Well, fabulous. Thank you. There are lots of great questions.
She's a great host.
Awesome. Thank you.
But that's not what we're supposed to do that's not the credits. Where are the credits? Sorry, everybody watching. We screwed that one up.
But it wasn't Pixel Core this time.
No, that's the key to marketing. We don't need that. Let's go to wait, I think we're going to recover now. Wait, we'll see. I don't know. No. It's just fading to black.
Wait that it closes.
There's our logo. Oh, that's great.
Great branding. Great branding.
Yeah. Okay. Roll the credits. I thought they were changing the direction of the arrow. I think